symptoms that you experienced in grade school, and even it could be personal and like social life that prompted you and your parents to get evaluated for learning disabilities or challenges?
Yeah, great question. So as far as the symptoms go, when you're a kid, you don't really recognize them, but it's the teachers and the parents that recognize them. Usually it's the teachers that tell the parents, and then, you have a little
Right.
sit down and they say, well, your kid's reading comprehension's a little bit off, and I don't know why your child can't sit still. We were thinking about incorporating duct tape into the equation, but that's illegal. And so, they'll go through and I think teachers are a little bit more challenged than what they were maybe back in the day because they don't know as much as what they do. And now, if a teacher goes to a parent and says, "Hey, I think there's an issue," that's a no-no because then the school's kind of responsible for flipping the tab on getting testing, and that gets in a whole new ball of the struggles. But ultimately, what happens is teachers and parents will say to a kid, "Hey, you've got these struggles," and the kids are like, "What the heck's wrong with me? Am I broken?" And so you start that stinking thinking mindset. And unfortunately, kids, especially when they're young, always take it to the extreme level. And I did that. I thought I was drunk and I thought I was broken. And the issues that got me the diagnosis, and back in the day, it was learning disabled and dyslexic. And then, the ADHD came later because they learned more. I'm not a young guy. So
You're not old either. I mean, you're
no,
older than me. I'm 31, but
I'll say
still,
that.
no, I get
My kids, they're like, "You're like a big junior high kid, Dad."
it.
So
Your
anyway,
kids are big. I saw that photo on your.
oh my gosh, I'm getting old. So I
No.
think that as far as those struggles go, and I tell this to parents all the time, when a kid gets diagnosed, and it's important that there is a diagnosis because you can't overcome something unless you identify what the struggle is. And so you got to go through that process. And so there is a benefit there. And so if it is dyslexia, if it is ADHD, if it is some kind of reading comprehension or learning disability or ODD or whatever, LMNOP, whatever letters you want to give it, you then can put together a success plan to move forward. Now, the problem is that the kid isn't mature enough to understand that benefit. So what you're dealing with now is that all the characteristics that got that diagnosis are no longer the greatest struggle. The greatest struggle is how do I keep my kid inspired in believing that they still have something to offer? How do I not have their confidence crippled through this diagnosis? And that's the struggle. And so that's why you hope that parents and teachers have the right tools, can, hop on a website like yours and say, "Hey, watch this success story. That's you." So
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that generally, encompasses, what I asked. I mean, clearly in grade school, you're not necessarily going to know, the symptoms, your X, Y, and Z, age and so forth. It's really the parents, but, back in the day, I memean, even 31 years ago, and you're older, so it would have been more, I mean, what they know about learning disabilities is completely different than,
right.
what you know today. So when you were diagnosed, I guess I'll talk more. I guess you can talk more about your parents, but what was their reaction?
Oh gosh. My mom, and this is a very common feeling. When a child gets diagnosed, I think moms automatically think it's their fault. What did I do wrong? Why is my kid not like every other kid? And
Right.
you need to just pull that out of the equation. Any parent that's watching this, you need to recognize that a lot of these are neurological disorders. These are things that are of the brain. They're not something that has anything to do with the way you are raising your kids, loving on your kids, nurturing your kids. These issues are there. They don't go away. You don't grow out of them. You learn accommodations to make them look like they're not in existence. But the truth of it is that once you get this diagnosis, and it's a good diagnosis, from a psychologist, and you go through the process, it's something that you have the rest of your life. And I always find it funny when somebody comes up and says, "Well, I grew out of my ADD." No, you did. You just figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
My dad went the other direction. He was pissed. He was just like, "What's the school not doing, and why aren't they doing it? I pay all this tax money." And so he went the other route. And so it wasn't really positive. And so, as a kid now, you have to battle that. So,
Oh,
right.
absolutely. I mean, I had a brain injury, so it was a little bit different because it was a result of my brain injury. But
Right.
I think it's harder when, there's no real apparent, physical or, even MRI, brain, deformities or however you want to call it. When you were growing up, did you go to a mainstream school or did you transfer or go to some type of special education school?
I did. I went to mainstream level school. Now that doesn't mean I was in the mainstream level. They put me in the special ed classroom, and things have
Okay.
radically changed from back in the '80s. Back in the '80s, they had special ed classrooms, and
Mhm.
they'd pull you out for the primary classes. Your English and math and so forth, and then you would go back into the mainstream for lunch and
Mhm.
physical education or art or electives, and that created an awkwardness because kids would see you get on the bus, get off the bus, and then you'd be gone half the day. Then they'd see you at lunch and they'd be like, "Hey, dude, what's going on, man? Where are they taking you, man? Are you okay? Blink twice if you need help." And so you ended up having to really kind of navigate a lot of those questions, and that's hard. And so you made up some things and became a
Right.
survivor.
Right.
Eventually, I made it to the mainstream level where I only had to go to the special ed classroom an hour a day. um, and that was a lot of hard work, but I also contribute that a lot to my teachers.
Mhm.
Getting into special ed classroom, you are now with a teacher who understands how to create accommodations to help a student move forward. The truth of it is that though these are looked upon as learning disabilities, really they should be called learning differences. And if you
Right, exactly what you kind
understand
of
that
mean.
teaching students that learn differently different ways, they're going to succeed. And that's why a lot of alternative schools do very well. That's why a lot of these kids excel, because they have the right teachers with the right tools to do the right thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I also went to mainstream school. There were no special education classes in the school. It was a private all girls school. And I worked my butt off, and I had tutors, and I worked with a
Sure.
neuropsychologist and so forth, and so learned strategies. But there were multiple times, and I went from K through 12, that they asked my parents to put me in a special education school.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I made it through, and yada yada yada. It's all done, but it can be tricky. And I
It's
think
hard. It's hard to navigate. Yeah.
it's best to always be surrounded by people that actually know your disability and
Yeah.
have a better understanding and so forth. What services and like support and I guess strategies did you learn to compensate for your difficulties? I mean, and did you ever receive any like psychiatric meds?
That came later
Okay.
in life, and we can talk about that. I know you got a medication question down here.
Yeah.
But as far as accommodations, so the school did the best they can. I mean, this is in the '80s, and so I don't even know if they called it ADHD back then. I mean, I know
Right.
that before ADHD, they used to call it minimal brain dysfunction. So I'm really kind of glad they changed the name, because that'd be kind
I
of
agree.
Big Len's your speaker today, and he's got minimal brain dysfunction. You're gonna have a
Right.
very entertaining time. So I'm glad they changed it, and so for me, the self accommodation. In fact, I wrote a chapter in one of my books. The most popular book I wrote was called Simply Special: Learning to Love Your ADHD, which for people that know about ADHD, they're like, why would you call it that? Well, it's a process to get to that point where you love some of those weird things about being ADD, like being
Sure.
resourceful, being outgoing, having a little bit more energy than normal people, creativity. And so those are some of the benefits. But I wrote a chapter called Cheating 101. That's how I survived. I became a cheater. I would find the smart kid, and I would sit next to that kid, or I'd go up to every kid and be like, hey, what'd you get for this? What did you get for this? And what I didn't realize at the time was I was demonstrating my resourcefulness. And that's an incredible skill that ADHD individuals have, that when you are out of the school setting, and in the workplace, that's why a lot of these individuals become amazing salesmen and saleswomen, because
Sure.
they're resourceful. They have no problem going up to
Yeah.
just strangers and being like, hey, you want this product, this amazing and that's how I got through it. And then I had a teacher who caught me. I got in trouble, and gave me some good instructions on how to utilize those skills, but in a more ethical way.
Right.
So I would have to write cheat sheets out before every test and turn them into him.
Oh,
And so
wow.
that process of hunting for the answers, writing the answers, and then reading the answers helped me retain the answers. And so I had to turn that in and make sure that he saw that I did the work. And that's a tool I still use. today.
Of course.
So,
And I mean, it also has to do with working memory and,
right, absolutely.
and then, there's also the whole executive functioning, component. I mean, and you and I could talk about medical terms left and right.
All day long.
Yeah, all day long, but just for our audience,
It's the
we'll keep it
prefrontal
keep it
cortex.
brief. But no, I mean, and
Right.
I have had to do similar things, and to this day, I still do with my work. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's a little bit easier because certain things. But like for instance, when I read, if I'm reading for work, quote unquote, or something that I really need to be like, I'm writing a book, or I need to be like really specific, and know exactly what I'm reading. I mean, I underline, I take notes,
Oh, yeah.
for me to retain, everything that's going on. I mean, I can read a book for pleasure and it's like fine, but it's just a little bit different.
Yeah, reading for me is like a contact sport. If I don't have my highlighter, my pencil, my pen,
No, of course.
taking origamis out of the pages.
Yeah, of course.
So
Uh, so, with learning challenges or differences, there often are social issues that
sure.
come about. Now, I'm talking more, I guess, specifically with grade school, because as you get older, I mean, you're married and have kids and so forth. So, may not even like be a parent at this point. But
Right.
did you experience, as a child and growing up, like any social issues? Did you have to work harder? It was you were, dealing with some like special education. You had to work with therapists and so forth, and that was not like what a typical, kid has
Right,
to
right,
deal
right,
with.
right. Yeah. So for me, the I was extremely introverted. You won't really pick up on that now because 25 years of standing on stage and overcoming the fear of speaking, which was one of my most greatest fears
Wow.
in the world. You wouldn't pick up on the fact that I was extremely introverted, very intimidated by going up and having a conversation with another kid. And it's funny because I felt more comfortable talking to an adult than I did a peer because I just felt judged and I felt flawed.
I
And
did too. It's very
yeah,
interesting.
so it's an interesting dynamic, and so trying to take these students who feel socially broken and building them up, finding a way to help them find confidence, and then giving them those gentle nudges to get out there socially amongst their peers
Mhm.
is super important. And one of the ways that you do that is by putting them in a position where they can experience some victories. Maybe it's not academic, but maybe it's athletic. Maybe it's some kind of a hobby. Maybe it's chess. Maybe it's being a part of the Lego club,
Right.
or something that kind of pours into that confidence bank, so that now they can, if they go out there and they don't get the results they want socially, they can reflect back and say, yeah, but you know what? I'm this and I've done that and I've achieved this. And so I'm okay. So,
Right.
yeah.
And like I guess to this day, I mean, it would be interesting. I mean, a lot of people with ADHD and are married and have kids and so forth. But are there any things like to this day where you feel maybe a little bit different in terms of your brain and obviously your interactions? I mean, you have kids and you're married and you're
I feel
happily
like I'm
married, so
married.
it's different. But
It's all the people that are outside my brain. They're like, dude, what's wrong with him? Here's the funny thing. Do you like Alexandra? Is that what people call
that's
you?
my full name. You can also call me Allie. So
Okay, Allie. So here's the funny thing, Allie, is that people will recognize these things, and if they're bold enough, they'll say, "Gosh, your brain works so different
right,
from everybody else's." But the person, I don't necessarily feel that because it's just me.
right,
And the other day somebody was just talking about my creativity, and I don't notice anything different. I just see things differently. And when you have these diagnoses, or you're a parent of a child with this diagnosis, it's good to recognize those as being a positive difference.
of course,
Not everybody has this ability,
of course.
and so I think that now, as I've gotten older, every bit of the title that I gave that book, I do love being ADD. I would never wish it on anybody because it is a struggle. But here's the truth, and you know this, Allie. Life is full of struggles. In this life,
Course.
you will face challenges of all kinds.
Yeah.
Testing of your faith develops perseverance, faith in yourself, faith in your abilities, faith in your friends and your community. And the truth of it is that without struggles, we don't get better. So
Right.
if I had to choose a struggle, I'm glad this is the one that I got.
Right. So you've dedicated your life to studying and learning about your ADD and spreading awareness and hope and so forth throughout your speaking. What, in terms of your studying, have you learned about ADD? Is there anything surprising that you've learned, about the brain? And
You know, what I do love is the smarter people are getting smarter. They're learning more and more, and learning things like, well, ADHD is can be hereditary. Definitely has given insight to parents who get their kids diagnosed and then recognize, oh wait, snap, I've got it as well. And so you do see, especially now that they've learned so much, there is an increase in diagnosis, and a lot of people are like, well, it's overdiagnosed. Well, I'm not gonna. We could debate that. If it's a true diagnosis, if it's through a psychologist and you go through those processes, then typically, yeah, they're going to give you that right diagnosis. If it's going to like just a pediatrician and you're like, well, my kid is so dang hyper, I don't know what to do. Well, maybe it's because you're giving your kids like a box of Fruit Loops and Pop-Tarts in the morning and it's a sugar high. They're down in it with Mountain Dew. But that diagnosis, the increase in it is because parents will take their kids to psychologists, go through that process, and then recognize in themselves, gosh, I've had this my whole life. And now getting that diagnosis gives them a great understanding of why they've had these struggles, why they've created these accommodations, maybe why they've had so many broken relationships, because ADD in relationships, very difficult. And that's maybe a whole other video.
no, of course.
But, what you learn is that if you can continue to stay in the know, and I wish that I would even do more than what I do, because it is tough. There's so much out there, but if you can try to stay educated, you're going to be more, you're just going to be blessed, because you're going to be like, oh, you're going to have a lot more of these aha moments. And I think one that I had, Dr. Russell Berkeley was doing a podcast recently, and he kept using the word comorbidity. And I'm like, what the heck? That word just sounds horrible anyway. Comorbidity.
Of course, I get it.
Comorbid means, but when you finally realize what he's trying to explain is that a person can have multiple diagnoses happening at the same time. Typically, one is a little bit more prevalent than the other. Well, now you realize, well, it's not just ADHD. Well, now my kid could have ADHD and OCD, and so that's a whole thing to juggle. And so what you get is not a cookie cutter type situation. What you have is just a vast amount of variety. And, if you can kind of grasp what that variety is in each student, then you can kind of put together a success plan for that individual. But yeah, no, just keep educating yourself, learning, watch videos right here from Allie. I was on her website, guys. There's tons of videos here.
I know there's tons, right? No, I mean,
they're great.
From my own experience too. I mean, I've encountered a lot of different things similar to you, obviously, and but yeah, and so I mean, there needs to be a greater understanding for sure.
Yep.
So I guess with your research and what you've studied, what have you, with the research and what you've studied and so forth, where would you like to see, research, go in the future?
Well, that's a tough question, because I'm not a psychologist. I don't have any kind of medical degree. Everything to me is more about relational and personal. And so years and years ago, somebody once they came up to me like, "You're like the simple ADHD expert." And I thought that was really funny, and it kind of stuck a little bit, because what I try to do is take very complex things and simplify them. And I think that if we could take that approach and recognize that, hey, all of these tools that we're putting out there, you got to take the medical jargon out. You've got to find a way to make it practical and realistic, because, if you pick up most ADHD books, the first 3 chapters are all medical jargon.
I know.
And, the people that need to be reading this book probably have ADHD and won't even make it through those first 3 chapters. What they want to know is, how in the world do I get my kid to focus long enough to pick up their damn socks? Because they're all over the house, and that's a trigger for a parent, if that parent has ADD. Or how do I, teach my kid to stay focused and memorize their spelling, words so that they can pass their exam? What tools are out there? Realistic, practical tools. So like giving your kid a little mouse pad and a pencil while they're studying and letting them tap it and it mutes the sound. But this little action right here is enough of a physical motion in his body to give him enough entertainment to stay focused on what he's doing here. Those types of things. We need more of that kind of stuff. And so that's where I'd like to see the research. Let those guys do what they do, and I love it because they need to do that. That's where the funding and the grant money and where we explore, medications, and medications are helpful. They are an accommodation. They're not a solution. If you are watching this and you're like, what about medication, Ben? Understand this. This isn't for you, Al. You know this stuff. I'm going to tell the people that are watching this. Medication is not an aspirin. Okay? Why do you take an aspirin? You get a headache, you take an aspirin, headache gone. ADHD medications are an accommodation. What they do is they slow students down enough in order to be able to utilize the other accommodations that the teacher provides. They make them teachable. Now, here's the really important part of medication is that dosage. What type of medication? Everybody's different, physiologically different. That's why, in fact, I just got this the other day. I got this little food sensitivity test because I'm like, I don't think I should be eating chicken. Every time I eat chicken, you know what? Bad things happen.
Yeah, food and diet is a huge thing. I mean,
absolutely. So, checking out and recognizing that, hey, guess what? Ritalин's not for everybody. Adderall's not for everybody.
Right.
Strateren's not for everybody.
Right.
Vyvanse isn't for everybody. And here's the thing. You have got to consistently, if you're a parent, monitor your kids, help them to become more self-aware. Does this give you a headache? Do you feel groggy? Do you feel like yourself? And so figure out what that right medication is. And don't be afraid to go to your doctor and say, I don't think this is working. We need to try something else.
Right.
Communication. So,
communication is great. I personally, I suffer from mental health issues. I actually have OCD, which leads to some depression and anxiety. Also, depression runs in my family. But, anyways, so that's what I get. Those are the types of meds that my psychiatrist prescribes to me. But in the real beginning, I went to him. He's a neuropsychiatrist, so specific on the brain, and I went to him for attention meds because my attention I'm not super focused. I can be a bit distracting. It doesn't affect me, but it can affect, my work ethic and, really school and just, getting things done within a structure, within a good time frame in any way. But I tried Ritalin and I tried Adderall. It was great for for the time it lasted. I have never experienced the worst side effects in my entire life. The headacheing, and it was nuts. And then my psychiatrist wanted me to take Stratera, and that's from what I know, it's a little bit better because it kind of builds up in your system. But I was like, no way, I'm not doing that. Like, this isn't mandatory for me. And I know people all the time, who are on Adderall, and it's overprescribed, and it's like you said, that's not the be all and the end all of medication. No. That's not the be all and end all of treating your ADD.
Absolutely.
Or ADHD. And that's something that needs to be more, I think, talked about in society.
Absolutely. The idea, and this is just a recommendation for who's watching this. Once again, I will state this. I state it all the time. I'm not a doctor. What I have is experience and knowledge. Me personally, and the people that I've worked with, is there is benefit in struggling. Okay. So if you can find a way to do this naturally and not put, different things into your system, then you don't have to worry about the side effects. Then you don't have to worry about, the dosage. If you do need to take those for a time being, the goal should be, how do I develop personal accommodation and coping skills while I'm on those medications, so that if I wean myself off of those medications, those then can take the place of that medication. You don't want to be on this stuff the rest of your life. Now, I have met some people, they probably should be, because there is, just like, in autism, there is a spectrum there. There is severity levels, and everyone is different. And so, it comes down to this: self-awareness, communication, making changes. Those
are the big three.
So,
Anyways, okay. So, in addition to your speaking, you also, in addition to speaking, You also are an author. We spoke a little bit about the books that you've
Thank God for spell
written.
check.
Yeah, exactly. But you're also an artist.
Shut up with Grammarly. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's all good. You're also an artist. So what motivates you to do art? Is it also, and is it, I guess, a creative outlet for you when it comes to your ADHD?
Yeah. Well, so part of my story is, when I was in, I want to say 11th grade, middle school, or junior in high school, depending upon where you're at, because different places of the world, they don't say junior, they're like 11th.
Oh, I know. Like they say like second year. I mean, and I know, but I have to think about it. It's and junior year can be 8th grade, it can be 9th grade, seventh grade. It's like, I get it.
What's a junior thing? So 11th grade, I was going through my IEP, which stands for Individual Education Plan, for those of you that don't know it. I had a 504 plan. The only way to describe that is that based on the state of Illinois where I grew up, they understood that I had a need for these accommodations. So as far as the state was concerned, I would have these accommodations made available. And you did this every year, and the goal was your special ed teacher, and maybe sometimes your guidance counselor was there. My parents would sometimes go. Well, my mom would go. And occasionally, when I got older, they let me come and be a part of this, which was really cool. Because as a kid, you want to be a part of these decisions. And what they do is they kind of puzzle piece your schedule together and try to figure out what teachers are maybe more hands-on and more team-oriented versus, hey, go read chapter 1 through 20, and we're gonna have a test on Friday. Yeah, set me up for failure if you put me in that class. And so really it's all about trying to create success. Well, they discovered that I was missing some requirements, and one of which was 2 years of a foreign language, 2 years of Jamaican, 2 years of Australian, some kind of a foreign language. And the people that are watching this will get that joke eventually. And I can remember my principal looking at me and saying, "Ben, you want to graduate?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'd like to get out of here pretty bad, thanks. What do I need to do?" And he's like, "Well, because you're special." Literally, those were his words. Dr. Waldorf. "Ben, because you're special, we're going to make an exception. You can either take 2 years of a music class or you can take 2 years of an art class." And first time I did anything with art, I was a junior in high school. Fell in love with it. Ended up bringing that to my performance on stage. So if anybody Googles Ben Glenn and check out YouTube, you'll see me drawing on stage on a huge 8-foot by 6-foot canvas, and that's kind of my story. Is that, hey, I'm ADHD. What you're watching is a guy on stage who's super hyper, drawing as fast as he can, praying to God it looks like somebody gets done. It's been pretty entertaining because I've been able to make a career out of it for 25 years until COVID hit. But we won't go into that.
Yeah, COVID.
So I have a studio. I love to paint. And really, as far as answering your question, I'll put my music on and I'll just start going. I do love landscapes and clouds and different things like that, but I've also really fallen in love with abstracts. Just letting my brain go. You wouldn't know this. And I don't know, how many people are watching this are into art, because sometimes you go to like a contemporary art museum and you'll look at an abstract piece of art and you're like, that just looks like doodles. You look at it, you're like, why are they calling that art? You'll see like a phone hanging there and you're like, that's art. Truth of it is that abstract art is really, really hard to do, because when you're drawing something abstract, there is no beginning and there is no end. There's nothing in there. Like if you're drawing a tree, basically when you're done, it's a tree. There's a starting point, roots and stems and all that. When you're drawing an abstract, you start, but there's nothing out there saying stop. That's why I love them, because they're really stinking hard. And I have a whole new respect for abstract artists, because when you look at a piece of abstract art, there is an emotion there. Sometimes you'll look at something and it's got great movement and flow, and you're like, and I love hiding stuff in my abstracts too. I was like, hide these little hearts, because my whole message is you got to find the heart. And so I really do enjoy that.
Yeah, no, art's a
great... I'm on a tangent. Sorry, Allie.
No, it's all good. Tangents are great. No, but art is a wonderful outlet. I mean, I'm not the greatest artist, and I've used it as an outlet, and I'm not saying obviously your story's a little bit different with art, but I think it's a great hobby, quote unquote, to have.
Oh yeah.
You sell your art and so forth, but I do think it's something that a lot of people get into who specifically also have learning challenges.
I'll throw this out to you. So when COVID hit, so I did my last show, February 27th, and right around the same time I was interviewing to be a part-time youth pastor at a church because I got two teenagers and I want them to get engaged. They're a lot like their dad, very introvert, and I wanted them to be able to go to like a welcoming, non-judgmental kind of a place. And so
Right.
I'm going to take
Absolutely.
this job, and as long as you guys come with. And so, but I have to do these staff meetings every Tuesday. And so I told my boss, I'm like, dude, if you're going to have me sit here, because the youth, we're kind of like an afterthought anyway. There's so much other stuff that has to be talked about, but I still need to be there. I'm like, you got to let me doodle. And so here, this is, if you got a kid who likes to doodle, this is what I do during my staff meetings. So I just like,
Oh my goodness.
goes
They're
like this.
beautiful though.
Yeah, I just
A
doodle.
lot of people doodle, even in class, I think doodling's great. I mean, I think also art provides such a calming effect.
That was mine from this last Tuesday. This is
my
my
goodness, I love it.
Christmas stuff going. But anyway, so now I've got like these staff meeting doodles.
Great, you can hang them up, the staff meeting doodles,
All of the staff. That's what I'm like. They watch me draw them, and I love the fact. And here's my point. On top of that is, if you are an employer or a teacher, and you recognize that you've got somebody who can function well like that. Because, Josh, my boss, he knows that even though I'm doodling or whatever, I hear everything they're saying. But it's that process of me kind of keeping busy that is allowing me to hear everything that he's saying. Mm-hmm. If I don't have that process, you know what my brain's doing? It's looking for something to focus on other than, what he's saying. And so create that accommodation for some of your kids and for some of your coworkers. It helps. And then you get a nice piece of art out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
Great. So you are known as the Chalk Guy. How did that name be? How did you create that name, quote unquote?
I did actually. So I was doing a show. Oh, this was early. So I started when I was 19. I went to college for 2.5 years. Then I retired. I went to school to be a teacher, and I got to my clinicals, and I realized, yeah, this is probably not going to go well. I was wrong. I think I would have been an okay teacher now that I'm actually in a teaching role now. But I was doing the show for this middle school group, and I'm walking out, and some kid just keeps screaming to get my attention. And he's like, yo, Chalky, yo, drawer man. And then he screamed out, yo, Chalk Guy. And I came home, and I'm like, that's it. That's what I'm going to be called. So chalkguy.com will get it done.
Yeah, no, it's a great name.
5 years now.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. So one thing that you do, every year is, you're the creator of, is the Chalkguy Lego Drive, and it actually fits very well now with the holiday season, even though we're in COVID. Can you tell us why and how you got into it, and like why do you choose Legos?
Yeah, absolutely.
For other games.
Short story. 2 daughters. They were young. This is 9 years ago. This is our 9th year doing the Chalkguy Lego Drive. Like a lot of kids, didn't understand the concept of giving, the joy of giving. A lot of that attention is, inward selfishness. And I was getting really frustrated as a dad. And, growing up, the things that stuck the most were teachable moments. It wasn't my mom saying, hey, do this, or, a teacher giving me a lecture. It was something experiential. And I hopefully you picked up on this. I love laughter. I love having a sense of humor. And I do like to torture my kids a little bit. And so when they were younger, I brought them to Target. This was about a week after Thanksgiving. And I said, hey, guys, both of you guys can go pick out a toy, whatever you want, as big as you want. And they thought I was nuts. And they both go pick out a Lego because they know that Lego's the best. And when we got home, before they could crack into them, I said, hey, we're going to wrap those up and give them away. And they were pissed. If 45 minutes and a lot of hot chocolate later, I taught them, hey, the reason why we're giving these Legos away is because there are kids out there that could never afford Lego. It's plastic gold. It's one of the most expensive toys, most quality toys out there. And my oldest daughter, Natasha, was the one to hand out those gifts to these kids. And when she did that and had that experience, she was hooked. And she, in fact, came over to me afterward. And she's like, Dad, can we do that again? And I'm like, I just shelled out $300. I'm like, no, that's a one-time deal. I'm glad you learned the lesson. But my daughter was so determined and loved this opportunity so much that next spring, she started going door to door asking for Lego from people. Do you have any used Lego back there? And so the second year, we collected like 100 pounds of Lego, went online, downloaded instructions, and we created 10 refurbished Lego sets, which took forever. And we gave those away. And after that year, I said, we're doing that again. And so I started fundraising and asking groups to get involved. And last year, with the help of a lot of people from my events and different donors, we were able to collect and give away 1,006 Lego sets. Now, we don't give away little sets because I don't like that. I don't play that way. We give Mamma Jamma sets. And so it was about $3,000 worth of Lego. And you asked the question, and everybody does, why Lego? Because it
makes sense now. That's what Natasha and your other kids picked out.
Well,
and it's a quality game, you know.
Exactly. And the other reason is because it is the best. And on all the boxes that we give, and this was really a fun story. So we give a lot of Lego to Riley Children's Hospital, and like most children's hospital, if you want to donate, you can't wrap the gifts, you can't put any markings on there or any kind of promotion. You want just the gift, and that makes a lot of sense. But when I showed them the sticker that we wanted to put on all these boxes, they said absolutely. And so all the Lego boxes get a sticker that says this: Lego is the best, and you are worth the best. We're just trying to build these kids up, build their confidence, recognize that there are people thinking of them, loving on them, and people that are willing to give them the best that's out there. And so that's why we do Lego.
It's amazing. So do the people that receive these Legos, are they like underprivileged, can't afford these Legos? Like, what's the process of like how you send these or give these Legos out?
Well, before we get into that, I will say, if anybody is watching this, we always love people to partner us with donors. And we have a website, giveyourbricks.com, and I'm sure Allie will put that in my bio. But giveyourbricks.com, you can actually go there and see who gets the Lego. Okay. We typically do a Lego count, but this year with COVID, I was really tempted to take a year off. But and I love it. I mean, as a dad, I can't get inspired. If you can't get inspired by this, I don't know what will inspire you as a parent. But my daughter comes up to me and I'm talking. I'm like, Natasha, I think we might need to take this year off. I haven't done any events. We don't have the money. And she's just like, Dad, something's better than nothing. And I'm like, okay. So I started getting.
I mean, we're living in COVID, and to be totally honest, like to give or to just even do something of that nature, I know there's limited means and so forth, is probably, and I'm not trying, I mean, I understand why you possibly were like, oh, let's take a year off, but it actually probably provides more like excitement and make life a little bit better despite these awful times.
Well, it really has actually become one of the more fun Lego drives that we've done because we've had to rely more on donors. And so now to have so much new blood into the program, I just love that it's not about me anymore, even though it's got the Chalkguy. And that's because most of my fundraising was done at events. Right. But now we've got so many more people involved. We've become nonprofit. Before we were partnering with nonprofits to give tax. But now we're officially the Chalkguy Foundation, and which is so huge. And so this, actually the 19th, we will be going down to a food pantry where people will be going through getting a week's worth of food, and then they'll come up to us at the end. And apparently this year I'm dressing up as Santa. That's why I got the beard going right here. And we'll be handing out all these Lego gifts, and it's really going to be fun. So I'm excited.
It's wonderful. I mean, it's funny because this year I've thought about giving more so than like, I mean, obviously I give generally speaking, but I'm just saying do something special for people because a lot of people are on unemployment. Like there's just so much going on.
I got a great website for you. It's called giveyourbricks.com, and if you
but I thought about it in New York City, but I'm just saying, like, I mean, I would do it in a heartbeat. Like, I just think it's what you're doing is something amazing.
I really appreciate that.
Do it as much as you can before Natasha goes off to college and wants to. I mean, I don't know if she's in college, but just then it's like has other ideas.
She's a sophomore, but she's freaking me out because she's old enough now to get her driver's license and. And really, that's my wife and I. We talk about it all the time. We're like, "How are we going to do this?" And I'm like, as long as she's inspired and wants to do this, because she really had to take the lead this year because I am juggling 2 jobs now.
And I know, I bet, yeah.
And I'm like,
continue. I think it's something that's passionate.
Yeah. Well, it's tradition now. It's tradition. I can't.
Exactly.
You can't escape it.
Yeah, of course.
That's what she told me. She's like, "Dad, you can't escape it."
No, it's true. Not after X number of years. No. That's what makes the holidays, and it's like a tradition. I totally get it. And I'll be the third wheel if I could.
Love it.
So, I guess lastly, to wrap up our lovely interview, what advice would you give to parents or anyone who's been recently diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, or any other type of learning disability or
Absolutely. Well, here's my little micro pep talk, and there's not a whole lot to say. I know that when you get diagnosed, there is that stinking thinking that creeps in, and you feel broken, and you feel alone, and you're not. And that's one of the reasons why I love Allie's website so much, because if you click on her little story button right there, all of these stories pop up, and they're all relatable. In the fact that all of these individuals have gone through some type of struggle, and that's what you're going through is a struggle. And knowing that you're not alone is so encouraging, and recognizing that there's resources and take advantage of those resources. Get past your ego and find a comfort level in sharing your struggles. There is a vulnerability there, and that's a hard thing for a lot of people, especially for a mom or a dad to go to somebody and say, hey, my kid has these struggles, and is there anything that you can offer up as a suggestion? So definitely find a community, and support to help you keep moving forward. And then finally, the one thing that I tell everybody that I speak to is do whatever you can to stay inspired. When you are inspired, you can do amazing things. And even though you've got this struggle, there's so many great things that you can do.
Absolutely.
That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
And, and there's tons of resources. There's understood.org. There's the Chalk Guy.
That's right. Chalkguy.com.
Yeah, exactly.
First, give me because we need to.
Actually, your book. Sorting. It's
sorting the Lego.
Yeah, no, and in closing, I think that what you're doing is amazing. Not a lot of people, I don't want to say all people, they have a learning disability, but they don't want to get into, the field or really spread awareness. And I think there needs to be more of that.
I agree. I absolutely agree.